Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to share God's word with you today. It is an absolute privilege to be able to do that. I grew up in church. I grew up in the Anglican church, and I remember when I was a child going along to Sunday school, and you get taught lots of different kids songs, which is great. And I remember this particular kids song. And you might remember it too, if you've grown up in church, or maybe you haven't, but you've heard it somewhere before. And I know it as With Jesus in Your Boat. You might know it as With Christ in Your Vessel. But either version of it, it goes something like this. And I'm going to sing it to you now. With Christ in your vessel, you can smile at the storm. Smile at the storm, smile at the storm. With Christ in your vessel, you can smile at the storm. As we go sailing by. And you go, sailing, sailing by, sailing, sailing by. So you might know the song, you might not. You might be laughing now and going, oh my days, I can't believe he's just sung that. But I want to speak to us today about how we can get to a place where we can truly smile at the storm. There's been quite a number of storms recently. I mean, you might remember physical storms like Storm Dennis. I think there was a storm called Storm Clara. I used to live up in North Wales, and it got very stormy around there. And I remember coming back from work at times to find my wheelie bin has raced other wheelie bins down the road, or my neighbour's trampoline has transferred from their garden into my garden. But there's also lots of other types of storms. For a lot of us, we've been experiencing the storm of COVID-19, the coronavirus, the pandemic. You might have been experiencing the storm of losing a loved one. You might have been experiencing the storm of losing your job or a broken relationship. There's lots of different storms that we experience in life. But how do we get ourselves to a place where we can truly smile at the storm? You know, because storms either happen to us or we can make storms happen ourselves. I mean, some of us are great at picking fights with our own shadows. You know, we can create storms in any environment. But regardless of what type of storm it is and how the storm came about, when you're in the midst of a storm, you can feel very hopeless or helpless. And I'm no sailor, but one of the things I've noticed about storms when you're out in a boat in a storm is that what they tend to do is drop anchor. Why do they drop anchor? Because they want a fixed point of reference, that the waves can batter them this way and that way, but they're anchored somewhere. There's a fixed point of reference. When I was on holiday once in South Wales, I love a little bit of bodyboarding. And one day a physical storm had come through, and I decided now's the time to go to the beach. So I grabbed Kaz and my boys, and we went down to the beach, and I put on my wetsuit, and I saw the waves, and they were nice and big because the swell was big after the storm. And I thought, yes, this is the moment to catch a big wave. And I went out. I'm no surfer, but I do like to do a little bit of bodyboarding. Went out into the waves, and I realized very early on that the currents were just too strong. The swell was big, the rips were strong, the currents were pulling me from right to left. And about 10 minutes later, I came out. It was just too dangerous. And I wanted to be able to bodyboard another day. But then I got out of my wetsuit, and we were standing there on the beach, and I noticed that there were two other people in the waves. And after looking a little bit more, noticed that it was a woman and a guy, or at least I thought it was a grown woman and a grown guy. And I thought, okay, they probably need to come in as well at some point. But then I noticed that the girl in particular started to get pulled towards this rip that was running alongside the rock face just off to the left of the beach. The guy managed to ride a wave in, and he got in, but the girl was caught in this. Or what I thought was a woman turned out to be a young girl. So in that moment, I put on my full David Hasselhoff mode, you know, big up to everyone who grew up in the 90s watching Baywatch. And I ran across over to the rock face and managed to climb up over the rock face and got down to where this girl was caught in this rip. Now, I could have just thrown myself in, but that would have been no good. I'd have got caught in the rip, the waves would have been pounding me against the rocks as well. So what did I do? I grabbed hold of a rock and anchored myself there. So then I was able to lower myself into the water and pull the girl out. You see, when you're in the midst of a storm, you need to be able to anchor yourself somewhere. You need to be able to have that fixed point of reference. The writer of Hebrews talks about fixing your eyes upon Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. He also talks about Jesus being the anchor or the hope as an anchor for our soul in Hebrews 6. And in that passage, it talks about how Jesus has gone behind the curtain. He's now the great high priest, and he's the hope, the anchor for our soul. So Jesus is how we can get to a place where we can truly smile at the storm. There's a brilliant passage in the Bible in Matthew chapter 8 where Jesus is in a storm. And I want us to be able to read that together now. Matthew chapter 8, beginning at verse 23. And it says this, "Then he got into the boat and his disciples followed him. Without warning, a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, 'Lord, save us, we're going to drown.' He replied, 'You of little faith, why are you so afraid?' Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm." Now, you may have heard that story many times before, but in particular, I want to bring out 3 different points that I think will help us to get to a point where we can smile at the storm. And the first thing is this. In verse 25, it says, the disciples woke him. The first thing we need to do is to stir hope. We've got to stir hope awake. Jesus is the hope of the world. You know, he is the hope, an anchor for our soul. We've got to stir hope awake. All of us have so much potential within us, but we need to awaken that hope, awaken that potential. You know, the children that we work with as Compassion, they've got so much potential, but they're facing this storm of poverty, and someone needs to come alongside them and stir hope awake, stir hope within that child. When you're facing a storm, you need a hope, stir hope awake. And Jesus is the one you need to stir awake. How many of you recently, with the storms that you have been facing, have actually gone to Jesus and said, "Help me"? Notice in this passage here that it wasn't the wind and the waves that woke Jesus up. It says that the waves were crashing over the boat, and yet Jesus was still sleeping. It was actually the voice of the disciples that woke him up. Your voice will wake Jesus up. Go to Jesus with the storms that you're facing, and he will wake up, and hope will start to arise within you. Then you can truly start to smile at the storm. The second thing is this, that he got up. Jesus got up. We need to stand in hope, learn to stand in hope. Notice when Jesus got up, the wind and the waves and the storm were still raging around him. You need to be able to stand in the storms that you're facing. You know, this is about building resilience. One of the things that we do when we work with the children that we work with as Compassion is that it's a long-term commitment to their development. When you sponsor a child, it's not like they're suddenly released from poverty overnight. It's a long journey. You know, it's getting a sponsor or encouraging you as a sponsor to journey with them through the whole process, because they need to learn to stand in hope day after day after day, even when the storms are still raging around them. There was a great prophet called the prophet Chumbawamba, who talked about when you get knocked down, you've got to get up again. You're never going to keep me down. And I wonder whether for some of us at the moment, with the storms that you're facing, you need to get back up again and stand in hope. And the third thing is this, that you've got to speak hope. Jesus woke up, he stood, and then he declared and he spoke hope. There's something powerful about speaking hope over the storms that you're facing. Speak hope over that child who is struggling at school. Speak hope over that broken relationship. Speak hope over the fact that you are struggling to find work at the moment. Speak hope over that life-controlling habit. You need to start to declare hope over those things. Notice the word that is used in this passage, that Jesus rebuked the wind and the waves. Why the word rebuke? Well, I looked into this, and you often rebuke something that is spiritual. And I wonder whether Jesus was teaching us, I believe that Jesus is teaching us something here, that actually some of these storms that we're facing are also spiritually connected, that they are not the original plan. I don't believe that poverty was God's original plan. When he created the heavens and the earth, I don't think he had a plan for people to be living in poverty. So we need to rebuke poverty, rebuke injustice, rebuke some of the storms that you're facing at the moment because they're not right. They need to be rebuked. I believe that one of the reasons why we encourage the children that we work with as much as we possibly can to find Jesus as their own personal Lord and Savior is because there is a spiritual dynamic to freedom. That actually only true freedom from poverty, true freedom from injustice comes when they find Jesus. Because Jesus is the hope. And when you find Jesus, you can truly smile at the storm. We're going to watch a short video clip now, which will illustrate what happens when hope truly does come alive in one of the children that we work with.
Dear COVID-19, they say you are erasing 30 years of global poverty development, and you won't stop.
Education enrollment in Kenya had never been higher.
And now, every school is closed.
Girls in Peru were hopeful about their future.
And now, for many, their focus is on where they will sleep tonight.
Child malnutrition rates in Burkina Faso had once halved.
And now, so many children face hunger once more.
All around the world, you are stealing hope and replacing it with despair. And still, you won't stop. But neither will we.
Hear us again, COVID-19.
We will rise
As one.
As one.
We will love like Christ.
We will bring food to the hungry.
We will pay rent for those losing stability.
And we won't stop.
We won't stop.
We won't stop.
We will serve their needs for hygiene, sanitation, and health.
We will find new ways of delivering education. And still,
We will not stop.
For we are the church. We are a steady, unwavering expression of Christ's love.
and we will rise as one.
As one.
Como uno.
pamoja comum.
As one.
As one.
As one.
So you can see from that video that we've just watched the impact of when a child truly does anchor themselves in hope. And I want to say thank you to the sponsors out there that have already come alongside a child and said, I'm with you in these storms. I'm with you through this storm of poverty. And can I encourage you, please continue to pray for the children that you sponsor and the children that we work with globally. Please continue to pray for the project workers and the church pastors. Continue to pray that they find hope and are able to continue to speak hope into the children that we work with. And the last thing is, please also consider writing a letter to your child at this time. Writing a letter is like speaking hope into that child. They receive that letter, they treasure that letter, and it reaffirms that they have someone partnering with them, walking with them through the storms that they are facing. So please continue to pray and write and speak hope. Thank you.